Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and another episode of Coffee Chat with me. Today we're going to go over part 2 of my series, How to Get an Investment Banking Offer, and this time we're about to talk about the interview process. Now this is all based on my personal experience. I went through the recruiting process spring semester of my sophomore year, and I went on coffee chats, interviews, participated in different kinds of investment banking programs. And so that's why I figured I would make a video on all of the tips and tricks I've learned throughout those few months to help you guys in your process too. So in today's video, I'm going to go over 3 things. First one being the structure of the interview process. Second one being how you can best prepare and questions and answers that you'll need to know. And last one being what to do at the actual interview. So first, let's talk about structure. This video will mostly be geared towards bulge brackets and elite boutiques because that's what I have the most experience interviewing for. However, I know that for smaller boutiques where it might be more of a generalist program or they might specifically cover just one industry, they'll generally be more rounds just because they want you to know more of the team. However, the general structure of the interviews I had would usually be a first round interview that would consist of about 30 minutes, followed by a super day the week after, which would usually consist of about 3 rounds of 30-minute interviews. So the first round interview will generally be with someone who is more junior. This will usually be someone who is a VP and below. Essentially, the purpose of a first round interview is to narrow down that list to a few candidates who they think are good and able to continue on to the super day. As a result, first round interviews will generally be more technical simply because they want to narrow down that list. Candidates who move on from the first round to the super day will be the ones who they thought answered the behavioral questions well, knew the basic technical questions, and who they think are truly interested in this job. So after the first round, firms will generally move on to the super day. The super day will usually consist of 2 to 3 rounds, like I said before. They'll generally be with someone more senior, like a VP or above. They'll usually vary from firm to firm, but you can generally expect to have 1 behavioral interview and 1 technical interview for your super day at the very least. After the super day, you'll be notified almost immediately, either day of or the day after, by HR or your interviewers. They'll give you a call and let you know that you got your offer. Afterward, you'll have about 2 weeks to decide whether you want to accept this offer. Oftentimes, if you just email HR, they're happy to give you an extension to that deadline as well. So next, let's go over how to prepare for the interview. So your preparation will be broken down into studying 2 aspects, behavioral questions and technical questions. First, I'll go over behavioral questions. So for behavioral questions, the number 1 answer you must have prepared well is your story. Your story answers, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why are you interested in investment banking? Why are you here today? It's always going to be the very first question you get in any interview, and I'd say it's probably the most important question to know. Your story is supposed to be a narration of your previous experiences and the academic, professional, or personal experiences that have led you to this moment right here for this interview. In terms of the structure of the answer to this question, I would structure it with 2 to 3 lines on your background, perhaps your hometown, where you go to school, what your major is. I would then go straight into the story of your spark. What led you to become interested in investment banking? Was it a series of internships that you did in the past where you found out that everything aligned to the qualitative and quantitative aspects of investment banking that you really enjoy? What else did you do after you got interested? Did you talk to more people within different investment banks to learn more about their experiences? And did that make you more interested, which is what led you to this moment? For your story, you should aim to have less than 2 minutes, preferably closer to the 1-minute mark. Additionally, for your behaviorals, you need to prepare 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses that you have. And for each of those strengths and weaknesses, you need a story to back it up. First, let's talk about the strengths. Now, for the strengths, you want it to be an answer that easily fits into other questions as well. For example, the interviewer might not ask you directly what are 3 strengths that you have. There are other ways they can phrase this. For example, they can say, what are 3 words that your coworkers or your professors would use to describe you? Or they can ask, tell me about a time that you displayed leadership. Tell me about a time that you worked well in a team. So those all show different strengths about you, but they're all phrased in different ways, and so when you come up with these stories, these 3 strengths, you want to make sure that you're able to fit in these stories into any of these molds, and you want to come up with at least 3. Now, similarly for your 3 weaknesses, you don't want it to be a weakness that is necessary to the job. You don't want to say something like, I'm really bad at attention to detail. You don't want to say, I'm bad at communication. I don't respond to emails very quickly. You want to say a weakness that is not relevant to this job. For example, you can say, I'm not very good at public speaking, but in addition to that weakness, you need to have a story that talks about your development. You need to talk about how you're trying to overcome that weakness, or how you've already overcome this weakness and how you continue to work on it. Your story shouldn't focus on the bad parts, but the good parts. Lastly, another question that people don't often prepare for is, what do you like to do in your free time? It sounds like a really easy question to answer, but you need to have a good and interesting answer. The goal here is to have an answer that intrigues the interviewer, that allows them to ask more follow-up questions, that makes them think you're an interesting person. During the interview, you want to have these answers prolong into longer conversations so that you can have a conversation with your interviewer and then they'll have a longer lasting, better impression of you. Now let's talk technicals. So personally, I use the 400 investment banking questions from the Breaking to Wall Street guide. It's a very comprehensive guide. It covers a short behavioral section in the front, which I personally didn't use that much, but I mostly use it for the technical questions following. It focuses on sections such as accounting, valuation, equity value, enterprise value, DCFs, merger models, and LBOs. For each of these sections, there is a basic section and a more advanced section. So my word of advice is to know the basic section like the back of your hand. The questions are in order of difficulty, so know the first 5 to 6 questions very well, and then go further down once you know those basic questions. In my personal experience interviewing at banks, especially at bulge bracket banks, oftentimes they don't delve deep into the advanced section, but if you don't know the answer to a basic question, it's a straight X off the list. Lastly, to prepare for the interview, a good practice is to do mock interviews. I fortunately had the chance to ask upperclassmen who'd been through a similar process to mock interview me. But for you, you don't have to ask anyone who's gone through the process, even though that's probably the best method. So you can easily ask a friend or a relative to also mock interview you. The important part is to see how your facial expressions are, if you're fidgeting too much, your flow of words, if you sound too robotic. It's always better to have someone from the outside perspective give you advice on how to improve. Now let's talk about the interview itself. Obviously, dress professionally, that goes without saying. It's the first impression of you when they see you. When you go in, greet them, shake their hand, ask them how they are. I think that goes for any interview at a corporate job out there. So a few tips I've learned from my own interviews are: 1, when answering behavioral questions, talk at a slow cadence, have natural pauses between. You don't want to sound like you've been practicing this answer several times. When the interviewer is talking, nod your head, just seem like you're engaged. They want to feel like they're talking to a person. When they're hiring you, they're not only looking for someone who matches everything technically and academically, they're also looking for someone who they think they could work well with on their team. Secondly, when answering technical questions, don't give away your entire answer at once. Just answer their question at the most basic level. For example, if someone asks you what a DCF is, literally just give them the definition of what a DCF is. Don't go into the formula, don't go into specifics of the formula, don't go into definitions of other aspects of the DCF. Just answer it short and clear. This is because if you say too much at the beginning, it's just going to lead to more and more difficult follow-up questions, and you're going to end up digging a rabbit hole for yourself. You want to give them the chance to ask the follow-up question of, so what's the formula for a DCF? Can you go into more in depth about this particular section of the formula? So another tip is that you want to have a conversation with your interviewer. That's ultimately the goal. Obviously, don't stray away from their questions that they need to ask and talk about other things, and sometimes there is just a list of questions that they're given that they need to go through. But a lot of times it's pretty free flow. They just want to know more about you, they want to know about your personality, and at the end of the day, after they've interviewed 5 or 6 other candidates, they're not going to remember how well you answered a $10 depreciation question or how well you answered a teamwork question. They're going to remember their impression of you and that they had a good conversation with you. They want to go back to the interview room and tell the other people, I thought this person was well spoken and intellectual, I had a great conversation with them, and I think they would be a great fit for this team. Another tip that I have is that you should also prepare for questions such as, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or what product or coverage group do you see yourself in? You want to seem like you're intrigued about this career and that you're interested and that you've thought a lot about it and your long-term goals. So when answering what product or coverage group you want to be in, don't say that you don't know or that you're still thinking about it. It's fine to say that you're open to different options, but I would suggest actually having one in mind. For example, you can say, I'm really interested in the healthcare group because I have family members in the medical industry, and it would be great to combine that personal knowledge I have with my family members and also combine it with my interest in investment banking. Lastly, at the end of every interview, the interviewer always asks, do you have any questions? Always have 2 or 3 questions prepared. I'd suggest asking just 1 or 2 of them depending on how long their answers are. But again, this shows that you're prepared and that you're intrigued in this job. Some questions you can ask, for example, if they're a managing director, you can ask, how have you seen this industry evolve over the past couple of years? What are the biggest changes you've seen? Or you can easily ask anyone, what do you think makes a good analyst? So that marks the end of my series on how to get an investment banking offer. I really hope this video was helpful for you all, and good luck everyone on your processes. Let me know how things go in the comments, and if anyone has any questions, please remember to subscribe and like this video. Once you subscribe, turn on the bell for notifications so that you get a notification every time I upload a new video. I'll see you guys next time.